Hello, this is Paul, the Oaken Knight. Before concluding my series on World at War 85's Drive on Giessen, I'd like to give some analysis on the battlefield situation, how I would set up a new campaign given what I have learned, and provide some commentary on the game system itself. Overall, NATO has done a good job of trading space for time and inflicted significant Soviet casualties in so doing. But from the Soviet perspective, they have consistently pushed NATO back and have also inflicted their own share of casualties. Overall, I would judge the campaign as a tactical victory for NATO for the following reasons. First, the casualties. The Warsaw Pact began the invasion with 64 steps of T-80s, organized into 3 Guards tank battalions, plus a small company in the Guards Recon Battalion. At the conclusion of the second campaign turn, they had already taken something about 38% T-80 losses overall. Granted, I have not yet rolled for replacements at the end of the late morning, but it is unlikely to fundamentally change the situation. Compare that to something about 27% casualties among M1 platoons. Casualties among the motor rifle and lesser tanks of both sides are running more like 50%. Second, and more importantly, NATO has not yet allowed any breakthroughs. The Soviets have been more grinding forward than blitzing forward, and they were unable to continue a full front advance as early as the second operational turn. As turns go by, the Soviet advance is likely to continue to narrow and become more sporadic as formations pause to receive replacements using the more favorable replacement table. Finally, NATO will begin receiving reinforcements, in addition to replacements, beginning the next operational turn. Specifically, 2 companies of Bundeswehr, Panzer Grenadier companies, will show up in any friendly zones at the top of the next operational turn. These formations contain both armored infantry and Leopard 2 tank platoons. Recall that the main difference between the M1 and the M1A1 is that the A1 uses the German 120mm gun first mounted on the Leopard 2. It's simply the best gun out there. Bottom line is that while the Soviet advance is likely to continue, it is already showing signs of running out of steam. Meanwhile, new and better NATO formations are already beginning to take up position in the line, and replacements will continue to build up formations that have been worn down. And the possibility for a NATO counterattack during Day 2 cannot be ignored. If you want to design your own campaign, here are some considerations and some things I have learned from going through this exercise. Number 1, I liked how I scheduled reinforcements overall. NATO has to live with what they start with for a while. They have to feel some desperation. Giving the first reinforcements at the beginning of the third operational turn, Day 1 afternoon, feels about right. Even so, I did not schedule any Americans to show up until early morning of Day 2. This also feels about right. Were I to make changes, I would schedule the Soviet second echelon to show up a bit earlier. The Soviets ran the campaign with something like 2 regiments, plus supporting elements from on high. A third Czech regiment was scheduled for the early morning of Day 3. That might be a little late. It might even be fun to have the second echelon come based on the performance of the first. Using good Soviet doctrine, success is reinforced, failure is hung out to dry. The better the first echelon performs, the earlier the second echelon arrives. It's a hard world, comrade. Number 2. Keeping the number of formations to a reasonably small level is a good thing, but give replacements at the end of each and every turn, not just during the night turn. Stuff dies quickly in modern combat, lots of stuff. To maintain a reasonable battlefield density of units, you either have to have more formations than I used in this campaign, or you have to give units a chance to recover at the end of each turn. Number 3, air power is deadly. Be sure to put enough anti-aircraft units on the ground, and remember that units with range 35 or more can shoot onto an adjacent map. Yes, you do have to count X's on the target map and add 35 to it, so range is still limited. Were I to do this again, I would add more anti-air to my campaign than I allowed in this one. Number 4, I'd also put in more artillery than I used, but you also need to have a rule for using special ammunition. I limited it to 1 per artillery platoon per scenario. That may be about right. Number 5. I liked how I selected the maps. Assuming you own both the expansion, including Drive on Giessen, plus the base map, you should have 15 maps. To select the maps, I allowed the defender to roll a d20 until 3 maps have been selected. The defender chooses which 2 of the 3 will be used, and also the map orientation. Each map is placed with the long edge running north-south. As a rule, the defender gets to choose where he defends. The exception would be meeting engagements where the map begins vacant. In this case, I do a completely random map setup. Number 6. It's a long campaign. Unless you are running a club event of some sort, you should consider shortening it. In the Drive on Giessen rules as written, you are looking at 40 to 60 engagements to do a 3-day campaign. That may be too much of a good thing for most gamers. To make the campaign more manageable, I'd consider reducing the number of daytime operational turns to 3 instead of 4. You could also reduce the number of days, or design a different strategic map that would generate fewer battles per turn. Or if you want to turn this into a 6-month project, then put your head down and go for it. Number 7. Don't worry about the point system. There has never been a strictly even battle in all of history. Why should you worry about that here? Just pick the forces that will drive the campaign in the direction you want it to go and run with it. If you are playing 2-person, then you can allow your opponent to choose his side. That's all the balance that you need. And now my closing thoughts on the game. To put a number on it, out of the hundreds of games I have owned and played over the last 50 years, I would rate 3 or 4 of them as 10s. Those are the 1%ers. I'd put World at War 85 as a strong 9. Certainly in the top 5%, maybe better. World at War 85's great-grandfather is the venerated and venerable Panzerblitz. I have that same feeling playing this game as I had pushing T-34s against the Wehrmacht back in the day. Its grandfather is Victor Games' Panzer Command, where Eric Lee Smith introduced us to formations and chit bowls. And finally, World at War 85 is the direct descendant of all the other iterations and refinement, lock and load introduced in earlier games in the series. Make no mistake, World at War 85 is a finely oiled machine and filled with all the twists and turns you would want to see on your tabletop battle space. It offers a superior gaming experience. The Drive on Giessen module provides a useful framework for assembling a campaign of your own design. You will likely find the need for house rules to fill gaps or refine some aspect or another you are not on board with. Based on my experience with campaigns I have run in years past, introducing house rules is normal and possibly even desirable. The only problem I would foresee is when you are playing an unrefereed and competitive game. Rules lawyers need not apply. Other than that, the rules offer a great framework for you to build on and make World at War 85 a rich, dynamic gaming experience. So with all that, it is time to move on and leave further World at War 85 adventures to you. Thank you for watching, and if you have not already done so, please subscribe. This is Paul, the Oaken Knight, wishing you a good evening.